Pillars of Eternity 1 Ultimate Edition, and this time we're gonna do the ranking of all classes in a game. There's exactly 11 classes and we're gonna cover them all. What's the strongest, what's the best, and what's the worst. Let's not waste time and let's go. Before we start with the video, I got a new channel about my cat. It's not a gaming channel, but it's a relaxing channel with a lot of gaming music, so you can chill out while doing something else. So, if you have a daughter, mother, sister, even your mother-in-law, recommend them the channel. They're also gonna like it, as well as if you have cats. It will be something like a cat TV as well. Your cats will have fun too. Thanks up front for subscribing on the new channel. Let's go to the video. The best class in the game and the most powerful class is by far the priest. There is no playing without a priest, and there are many reasons why I say so. The best abilities, the best spells in the game belong to priest if you plan to play on harder difficulties, especially on Pot of the Damned. Now, why do I say so for the priest? Not only that priest offers bunch of healing spells and bunch of buffs, okay, like giving flat might, better chance to hit to allies with perception, self buffs as well, and so on. The priest offers something that's unique only to the priest in the game, and that's why there is no playing without a priest, and those would be the prayers against specific abilities that enemies cast on you. In other words, when you have priest, you cannot get paralyzed, you cannot get dominated, charmed, all of those most annoying things in a game, terrify, and so on. When you have priest, you are immune to that. Without a priest, this becomes a very hard game, not only for the priest, for the entire team. Because on the harder difficulties, enemies are completely nuts with crowd control effects, and priest mitigates those effects to nil. Also, as I said, not only that you have a lot of healing, not only that you have a lot of AoE buffs, raising accuracy, critical chance for allies and for yourself and so on, priest also offers some of the damage dealing spells like huge AoE Storm of Holy Fire, then the flat burn damage, then the traps. They're also very good to cast them before opening the fight and then dragging enemies into the traps and so on. So priest offers a bit of everything, but again, the most powerful things on a priest would be his prayers, and that's how the game is. So if you plan to play on harder difficulties, you gotta have Durance in your team, and that would be the most powerful class in the game, the priest. The second most powerful class in the game is, of course, wizard. Wizard is by far the biggest damage per second in a game. Wizard is also the best crowd control in a game. Now, why do I say so? Wizard offers so many spells from tier 1 all the way up to tier 8. And by that, I'm not only that it offers a lot of variety and big variety of spells, Wizard also offers one of the best crowd control spells in a game, like Wall of Many Colors, like Tain Chaotic Orb. All of those are nuts, not to mention Console Hut's Crushing Doom as well. Then classic Petrify with Gaze of Adragan. Then early game, I don't wish to comment about early game with stacking up Chill Fog and the Slicken. That's literally valid from start to finish of the game, that makes enemies prone. So Wizard, on top of his crazy damage, and Wizard has a lot of damage dealing spells including Control Fire, Fireball, Chain Lightning, then he's got some summons as well. So on top of all of it, Wizard also offers crazy crowd control. Also, Wizard offers a lot of good self buffs, and by offering that, he also offers build variety. You can play Wizard as a classic crowd control wizard, as a classic evocationer, as a mix, or you can just go in and play as a battle mage. That depends out of your stats, of course, but Wizard can be played in a lot of different ways, and it's by far the biggest DPS that exists in the game, and that's why it's on spot number 2. On spot number 3 would be, of course, Paladin. Paladin is a best supportive bruiser in the game, by far. Now why do I say so? Not only that Paladin can sustain a lot of damage, Paladins can also heal, they can also focus enemies, they're very good against undead, they can also do some small buffs to allies like raising attack speed, etc. And the most powerful thing on every Paladin would be auras. Paladins offer a lot of different auras for a lot of different party compositions. Yeah, so Paladins are probably the strongest melee class in a game all around. They're not as great as dealing damage, they're not as great, or should I say the best tanks. They are all around great for a melee class. They're far from best support, but once you combine great damage with great tankiness, with great support, with great auras and so on, you get a perfect mix. Basically a bit of everything from all classes and you get a Paladin, yeah. So that's why it's on spot number 3. It's also very user friendly and easy to play. On spot number 4 we got, of course, Fighter. Fighter, there is not much to say about the Fighter. Why I placed it on spot number 4. Fighter is like the best tank in a game. You need a tank, you need someone to accumulate damage, to bar the doors, okay, to engage enemies. You just need a tanky character. Yes, you can do it also with summons. Chanters can summon stuff, Wizard can summon stuff and so on, and you can tank up with summons. But they're definitely not a fighter, okay? When fighter is played as a full tank, you got nothing to worry about, basically, because most of your party is free to do what they want when you have a fighter in a team, and that's why the fighter is on spot number 4. On spot number 5, we get a monk. Now, why is monk so supreme compared to other melee classes? Very simple. First of all, monk doesn't require items to be efficient. You can play with bare fists, so that's the reason number 1. Reason number 2, this is the most agile class in a game. Speed of a monk during the combat is extremely high and you can reposition and focus enemies one by one. Monk also offers the best crowd control spells in a game, like reach, kick, and so on. As far as melee classes go, it offers the best crowd control. That doesn't count as ranged, only as melee. Also, monk offers summons, which is very rare. No other melee class can offer summons. It offers build variety as well. You can play with fists or you can play with staffs, quarterstaffs and other weapons. And we can easily say that monk is by far the best sustained class in Pillars of Eternity 1 as far as melees go. A perfectly balanced melee class. Why it's on spot number 5 and not in front of the fighter? Because it's not as user friendly as Paladin or Fighter. Monk requires better positioning and better understanding of the game to be played the right way. And that's why I placed the monk at spot number 5. On spot number 6 we got Barbarian. Now, same what I said about monk, same applies for barbarian. The only difference between barbarian and a monk is that barbarian has slightly better DPS, but less agility. But it makes up okay with Dragon Leap, because you can leap around the map and focus enemies, and not to mention that barbarian is the only melee class that deals AoE damage when it hits an enemy. So, the bigger the intelligence is on a barbarian, the wider the area when you actually hit enemies. Also, barbarian offers a lot of yells, crowd control, where you can terrify enemies, frighten them, make them weaker. So what Paladin does for the team against enemies by buffing allies, for example, with auras and so on, that's what barbarian does vice versa to enemies. Barbarian debuffs enemies and it offers the similar damage like a Paladin, maybe slightly better damage, and that's why I place Barbarian on spot number 6. On spot number 7 we got the Druid. Now, why isn't the Druid higher? First of all, this is not Pillars of Eternity 2. This is Pillars of Eternity 1. And the Druid in Pillars of Eternity 1 lacks a lot of great spells that you have as a Druid in Pillars of Eternity 2. Now, aside from that, what is the Druid in Pillars of Eternity 1? Druid is a perfect mix between a Wizard and a Priest. But he is not as powerful as a Priest in terms of AoE buffs, healing and so on. He can do all, but not as powerful, and he's definitely not as powerful as damage per second as a wizard is. So he is a mix. So if you want to play as a druid, you gotta have that thing in mind. You can't expect damage from a wizard, and you can't expect supportive skills like for a priest. Something in between, that's what the druid is, and that's why I place him on spot number 7. Druid, in other words, when you would combine all classes in a game and give it one class, everything that exists, but to be mediocre, that would be Druid. He's got mediocre summons, mediocre damage per second, mediocre tankiness, mediocre AoE effects, mediocre healing. Everything is flat up mediocre, but he covers everything that exists. And that's how the druid is played. On spot number 8, we got Chanters. Chanters are passive buffers because of their songs, and they are the best summoners in the game. Every team benefits a lot out of the Chanter, but the problem is with this game, because most of the fights will not last long enough, Chanter becomes useless. Why? Because it takes some time for all of those songs to create those incantations that you can actually summon and cast spells and trigger those abilities, okay? And by the time abilities are available, the fight is done and you cannot cast abilities. So the Chanter is useless in 90% of time in the game, but when it's best to have a Chanter against big bosses, that's where Chanter dominates. When the fight lasts long enough, the Chanter is the strongest, because again it takes a lot of time for him to roll on. In the 90% of the game you won't even need the Chanter. So when do you take the Chanter? You take him against mega bosses in the game. That's gonna be supreme. Maybe the Chanter is actually the best class against huge bosses and fights that last for a long amount of time. Aside from that, you really don't need a Chanter. On spot number 9, we got a Cypher. Everything that I said about a Chanter applies to the Cypher as well. Extremely powerful class, but completely useless in 90% of the game, because most of the spells you won't be even using on a Cypher, because you need to shoot with a basic attack, and until it gets focused, then you cast like a spell or two and the fight is already done, okay? Wizard will already cast like 5-10 spells when Cypher casts 2 spells only. But Cypher really offers a lot of powerful spells in return, and very unique spells. It's fun to play with, but I would say that it's useful to play as a Cypher later on in a game when fights last longer, to actually see the full potential of a Cypher. Early game, you really don't need a Cypher. Cypher is also by far the best crowd controller in the game. So the most devastating effects on enemies like stuns, terrifies and so on are produced by a Cypher. So if you wanna have control over fights, you're gonna play as a Cypher. But again, it's not strong enough, at least not in Pillars 1, like it is Omega strong in Pillars 2. On spot number 10, we got Ranger. Ranger is by far the best ranged class in the game, the best DPS with ranged weapons, with bows, crossbows and so on. But there is a big problem. Even though Ranger is very powerful, and Ranger also offers an animal companion, okay, to soak up damage and so on, animal companion is nearly not tanky enough like a fighter or like some summons in the game. That would be the first problem. Even when you max out the animal companion, it's not tanky enough, especially not on Pot of the Damned difficulty. So this falls off, even when with max upgrades. As far as Ranger goes, it's boring. And that's the main problem. You sit behind the team and you just shoot, you cast a spell or two from time to time, and that's about it. It's a very boring class to play with. And to be honest, that's why I place Ranger on spot number 10, because it dulls the game, but far away from it that it's not a strong class when you want to put flat DPS. On the last spot, we got Rogue. Unfortunately, in this game, Rogue is by far the weakest class, no matter if you decide to play as a ranged Rogue or as a melee Rogue. The reason, similar as Ranger, very boring to play with, maybe a bit more fun when you play with invisibility and you blind enemies and then you do the finishing blows on enemies and so on. So maybe a bit more interesting, but in return you risk your life every time you enter. You can get one-shotted, especially on harder difficulties. So Rogue, this is not a Rogue from Pillars 2. This is by far the weakest class in a game because, again, there is a better range class as a ranger than a ranged rogue, and definitely that 5 better melee classes as a melee than the rogue is. Really, like, the worst class in a game by far, and that's all I can say about the rogue. Don't play as a rogue. That would be my ranking of Pillars of Eternity 1 classes. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you on the next one. Thanks for watching.